Hello. The brutal murder of 5 innocent passersby shocks the whole town. The murderer is quickly found, as he has left a lot of evidence. The police and the victims are expecting a quick retribution, but the only testimony they manage to get out of the killer is the name Jack Reacher. Who is he? The real killer? The hirer? Or the suspect's savior? The mysterious Reacher shows up, and he has but one goal: to find out the whole truth. A stranger in a white minivan is driving along American freeways. A man in gloves stops in a multi-story parking lot and drops a coin into a parking meter. The sniper takes aim at a young girl with a child, a man on a bench, and a woman holding papers. The shot breaks the silence, and the bullet instantly crosses the space above the water's surface, followed by a second and a third. People fall dead before they even understand where the danger is coming from. Detective Emerson examines evidence at the scene: a shell casing and a coin from the parking meter, which turns out to have the fingerprints of a certain James Barr. He is found asleep in his own house, and the same minivan and homemade ammunition are found in the garage. Emerson and District Attorney Roden are present at the interrogation. Barr, however, in complete silence, writes a single phrase on a sheet of paper: "Get Jack Reacher." The lawman conducted a background check on the decorated veteran of military campaigns. He has served as an investigator in the military police and then suddenly quit. At the same time, upon arriving in America, Reacher disappeared from all radar. He didn't even have a phone number, even though he was completely clean before the law. The men have just begun talking about where to find him when they are interrupted by the secretary.
Excuse me, sir. There's a Jack Reacher here to see you.
But the confrontation with the suspect does not take place because Barr was beaten during transportation and is now in a coma. Roden reports that Barr wanted to see Reacher himself, which surprises the man greatly. Jack asks to have access to the evidence, which he is denied. The man hurries off without explaining anything. The prosecutors demand answers, but are interrupted by Helen, the prosecutor's doctor and Barr's lawyer. The girl asks Jack to testify as a defense witness, but Reacher refuses.
I didn't come here to help him. I came here to bury him.
Meanwhile, a guy named Linsky receives a paper bag full of money. Helen tries to get any information out of Reacher. She is a principled opponent of the death penalty, so she takes the case. Jack, in turn, assumes that the girl merely has childish grudges and rebels against her father, the prosecutor, who has never lost a case. Helen is persistent, however, and Reacher reveals that he and Barr served in Iraq.
Then there's the kind who want a legal means of killing other people. James Barr is one of those.
The sniper's job was to observe, to all day long look at civilians through his rifle scope. But not once did he receive orders to shoot, and 2 years later, the troops began to withdraw. Unable to withstand the tension of waiting for what never came to be, James Barr found someone to shoot at. 4 security guards from a private company. The men were rapists, and many women had been hurt by them. So the case was hushed up. But Reacher dug deep, and eventually Barr was forced to confess. Jack is clearly interested in justice, and Barr's guilt is yet to be proven. So why now, instead of making a confession, did the sniper call Reacher? Helen manages to convince the man to consider the evidence, but Reacher sets a condition. The lawyer must personally meet the relatives of the victims and learn everything about them. Helen shows up at the door of the murdered girl's father, who is clearly not happy to see the person defending a maniac in front of him. The scene is watched by Linsky from his car. He has a dossier on Reacher with him. The man calls somebody while the parent invites Helen into the house. Jack, meanwhile, heads to the shore where the murders took place and investigates the shooter's position on the other side of the river. He mentally reconstructs a picture of the crime. Linsky continues to follow Reacher on the bridge connecting the banks, from which he could fire as well. The dead woman's father begins to threaten the killer's lawyer, and just as Helen manages to escape from the house, she is found by her prosecutor dad, who has been following her. The father tries to reason with the girl that a case like this would only ruin her career. He has picked a good moment to plant seeds of doubt, but the girl is adamant. Reacher visits the evidence room under Emerson's supervision.
He's about to fire 6 shots into a crowd of strangers, and he's worried about the meter maid.
The detective, however, insists that Barr was not conscious of this action and simply put the coin in out of habit. Reacher heads to a local bar. A girl named Sandy sits down next to him. Jack introduces himself by a false name, and in return, Sandy says that the name doesn't suit him. Jack assumes that the girl wants to make money off of him. An insult to Sandy, who says she earns an honest living at an auto parts store. Sandy's acquaintances approach, demanding that Reacher take responsibility for his words, but they don't get what they expected.
I meant slut.
Hey, that's our sister.
She a good kisser?
Reacher goes out into the street surrounded by 5 men. He only expects 3 opponents, however, for he knows what the remaining 2 will do.
Really?
Everything goes exactly according to plan, though the cops arrive and take Jack to the precinct. Helen and Emerson visit him in his cell. Despite the injuries, none of the boys filed a report, so Reacher is free to go. It looked as if the girl had instigated the fight and knew Reacher's real name. Someone had hired the brawlers to take him off the case. After scrutinizing the 5 victims, it turns out that 2 of them were lovers, which means Barr could have chosen them for a reason. Now they need to find out the places he lived and who he socialized with. Linsky arrives to meet a skinhead shooter and his boss. He admits that he hired the guys to slow down Reacher, and that the person who took the order had already been disposed of so that he couldn't turn anybody in. The hitman isn't happy with the guy for acting on his own, and the boss, an old man with a walleye, comes into the conversation. He tells what he had to do to survive in the Siberian camps.
Shoot these fingers off before the frostbite could turn to gangrene.
He did the same with his other hand to avoid going into the sulfur mines. Now, the screwed up Linsky too must prove that he is an iron character and can outdo himself. Screaming, the guy tries to chew his fingers off, but eventually gives up. The shaved head thug shoots him and pulls out a saw. Helen and Reacher discuss that there must be a shooting range close to where Barr used to train, but in the meantime, they need to find Sandy at the local auto parts store. The salesman won't call the girl, so Jack breaks into the storeroom and finds her himself. It turns out that Jeb Oliver, the ringleader of the gang from the bar, asked her to help. Reacher takes her car keys, which turns out to be from Jeb's car, and advises the girl to disappear from town for a couple of days. The hero pulls away from the store and is already being followed by the criminal boss's agent. Jack explores Jeb's house, when suddenly he is hit in the back of the head with a bat. When he regains consciousness, he takes out the thugs and then the guy from the bar who now has a gun. From him, he learns that Jeb is missing, which means he's already dead. Reacher gets into Jeb's friend's car to tell Helen about his findings. Barr wouldn't shoot from the parking lot. The sun wouldn't cover his sight on the bridge, and the casing would have remained in the car, where a professional sniper would have fired from. He certainly wouldn't pay for the parking, and besides, Barr was an average marksman, and the shooter only missed once, and so badly that the bullet got stuck in a liquid container. He had wanted to get caught. He'd have done everything to achieve it. Barr knew that Reacher would notice all these inconsistencies, so he decided to call him. He is innocent. Helen does not believe the arguments and sees personal motive in Reacher's actions. He wants to drag out the investigation so as not to return to vagrancy. In turn, he calmly explains that he has been fighting for freedom for a long time and that he has decided to take a closer look at the result of his labors, America itself.
Look at the people. Tell me which ones are free.
All of them are bound by commitments, stress, and anxiety. Reacher actually does what he wants, and he knows he's being followed. Helen calls the police to run the plates of the car outside the window. The gangster boss is immediately informed that he's been uncovered. But who wanted 5 people dead? Helen is informed that the car is registered to a firm that wanted to buy the business of one of the victims. 4 accidental victims were needed to cover up a non-accidental one. Oline Archer refused to sell her construction firm and paid for it with her life. Barr, on the other hand, was framed by an acquaintance who knew about the Baghdad murders. Helen has enough information about Oline Archer's business to do her job. Nonetheless, Reacher wants to go further and catch the real killer.
No, I can't take this to court.
Exposing the truth.
Jack says goodbye and leaves. And Sandy, who did not follow his advice, is attacked and strangled by the bald thug and his accomplice. Later, Helen finds Jack and gives him information about the shooting range. The man is worried about the lawyer's life and suggests that she not tell anyone about their findings just yet. Emerson finds Sandy's corpse near the hotel where Reacher is staying, and the evidence points at him. Presumably, the hero stalked and interrogated the girl after the incident at the bar and took her car keys. Jack drives up to the hotel and sees a dead body. The detective walks out of the building, and the men's eyes meet.
Out of the car!
Several police cars are chasing Reacher. The real criminals, who have been following him all this time, are also involved in the chase. Jack notices this and tails the bandits, realizing that this is his only way out. but the killers manage to get away, and the police helicopter is already hovering above them. Reacher gets out of the car and stands in the crowd of passersby for cover. The prosecutor and the detective tell Helen that Reacher apparently killed Sandy and Jeb, injured their friends, and fled the police chase in their car. The girl gets a call from Jack, who confesses that he stole her car, but won't stop if she wants to quit. A prosecutor or detective is definitely involved in the case. They're the only ones who could have put him under surveillance from day one. Helen doesn't want to suspect her father, but Reacher sounds convincing, and the girl eventually kicks the men out without saying anything about the call. Jack has one last lead: the shooting range. He asks the elderly owner, Martin Cash, about James' bar, but the man isn't going to tell him about the club members. Instead, the old man offers to sort it out like men do and gives Reacher a rifle. Jack has to hit 3 bullets exactly in the center of the target, which he accomplishes. The hero explains that someone has been framing Barr all along and has been visiting the shooting range with the sniper to shoot targets instead of him. And this friend was caught on Cash's cameras. Reacher has enough evidence and calls Helen. The girl, meanwhile, is doing what Jack warned her against, telling her father all about the construction company that has been laundering money for years and is involved in the murder.
You're really so set on putting this man to death that you'd ignore.
Helen leaves with the thought that her own father is willing to sacrifice her life for a shady cause, when suddenly, Emerson enters the elevator with her and knocks the girl out with a stun gun. On the first floor, they are met by the shaved-headed thug and his accomplice. Reacher calls Helen, and the killer picks up the phone. However, the blackmail doesn't work. Reacher has already uncovered the perpetrator's identity at the shooting range.
I have a picture, prints, and I'm going to the feds. The lawyer's all yours.
Nonetheless, Jack calls several other times and says that if the girl stops answering the phone, he will disappear and pursue the killers from the blind spot for the rest of their lives. Eventually, they do set up a meeting. Before the inevitable confrontation, Reacher turns to his only ally, Martin Cash. He asks the sergeant for a rifle. The latter refuses, but offers his assistance as a shooter. Reacher has to trust his life to a recent acquaintance, who in addition, will only shoot if they open fire at Jack first. Jack backs into the pit, hiding from the bullets in a lowered seat. The old man hesitates, and when he opens fire, he doesn't hit any of the shooters, though he forces them to hide. This gives Reacher time to take cover, but he is now just a human target, and the only hope is for the sergeant. Cash knocks out one shooter, but reveals his position. Reacher picks up a rock from the ground. That leaves just the sniper. The sergeant disables his rifle, so the man to retreat back to his base. While Cash is distracting the guards in the truck, Reacher gets rid of the other two. The shaved-headed man comes out to fight Jack. Hiding in a wall of rain, Jack sneaks up behind him and disarms his opponent. But simply killing him is not enough. Reacher challenges the killer to a hand-to-hand fight and emerges victorious, as the villains hear the screams of their accomplice, whom Reacher inflicts one injury after another. As Jack comes to the door, Emerson covers himself with Helen's body in a pathetic attempt to escape.
Nobody would have thought to dump that meter. Not even me.
One accurate shot is enough to finish off the corrupt cop. Helen calls the police while Reacher demands answers from the boss. However, the villain is not going to give up that easily. It is unknown which of the men has more suspicions and bodies on him, and who is more likely to go to prison. Then, concluding that the judicial system can't do better than him, Reacher carries out the verdict himself. Martin Cash is waiting outside. Helen doesn't know what to do with this whole mountain of corpses, but Jack is sure she'll figure it out. It's time for him to disappear again. Barr comes out of his coma with memory loss, and the news has already convinced him that he has killed innocent bystanders with his own hands. The guilt for getting away from the Baghdad murders has also taken its toll. Helen asks him to tell them how he should have acted on the day of the crime, and then Barr details that he would have fired from the bridge in his minivan. James is so convinced of this incorrect version that this alone proves both his innocence and insanity. Then Barr adds that nothing can protect him from the guy whom justice is paramount, and who has made him one promise in Baghdad.
If I ever got in trouble again, he'd be there.
As always, look for the movie title in the description of the video. We can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? Is it fair to dispense justice without a trial? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like so that more awesome stories come out as often as possible.